Most people are not failing at life. They are succeeding at something far more dangerous. They are succeeding at being average. And the most chilling part, they were never asked to choose it. It was chosen for them, slowly, quietly, in the space between childhood wonder and adult resignation. The question is not whether mediocrity exists in your life. The question is, how deep has it gone? There is a word that psychologists use, conformity. But that word feels too clean, too academic, too distant from the lived reality of what happens when a human being quietly dismantles their own potential piece by piece. What we are really talking about is something older and more intimate than a sociological term. We are talking about a kind of spiritual erosion, a slow, nearly invisible process by which extraordinary human beings, and every human being is born extraordinary, trade their fire for comfort, their questions for certainty, and their aliveness for the dull warmth of fitting in. Aristotle wrote that we are what we repeatedly do, and excellence is therefore not an act but a habit. But here is the inversion that no one talks about. Mediocrity is also a habit. It is practiced, refined, and in many societies, deeply rewarded. You are praised for not rocking the boat. You are celebrated for knowing your place. You receive the nods of approval precisely when you stop asking dangerous questions and start accepting the answers that were already prepared for you before you arrived. The psychology of mediocrity is not the psychology of laziness. That is a common and deeply misleading mistake. Lazy people exist, yes, but the mediocre majority is not lazy. They wake up early, they work hard, they follow the rules, they pay their taxes, they smile when the moment requires a smile. The psychology of mediocrity is the psychology of fear dressed in the costume of practicality. It says, this is realistic, this is mature, this is what responsible adults do. And underneath that dignified language is a terrified animal that learned, somewhere between the ages of 5 and 15, that being too much made people uncomfortable. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we build to survive the social world. But what happens when the mask becomes the face? What happens when the armor you wore to protect yourself from rejection slowly fuses to your skin until you can no longer remember what was underneath? This is the tragedy of the mediocre life. Not poverty, not failure, not even suffering. The tragedy is amnesia, forgetting that there was ever a different possibility. And here is the question I want you to sit with as we go deeper. When was the last time you did something that genuinely terrified you? Not because it was dangerous, but because it was authentically, vulnerably, irreducibly you. Let me tell you about a version of a story that belongs to millions of people. A child grows up with a fire inside them. Maybe it is art, maybe it is science, maybe it is a way of asking questions about the universe that makes adults nervous. And the adults, with the best intentions in the world, begin to manage this fire. Not extinguish it. No, they love this child. They want this child to be safe. But they teach the child, in 1,000 subtle and unsubtle ways, that fire is dangerous, that standing out brings punishment, that the group will protect you if you are like the group, and abandon you if you dare to be different. By the time this child reaches adulthood, the fire is not gone, it is buried. And the terrifying thing about buried fire is that it does not disappear. It turns inward. It becomes frustration without a name, anxiety without a source, a persistent feeling that life should feel more significant than this, that something essential is missing, though you cannot say exactly what. You may recognize this, not because you have failed, but because you have been so precisely, expertly trained to succeed at the wrong game. The psychologist Abraham Maslow spent decades studying human motivation and arrived at a conclusion that was both beautiful and devastating. The highest human need is not love, not safety, not belonging. It is self-actualization, the need to become what you are fully capable of becoming. And he estimated, based on his research, that less than 1% of people ever truly reach it. Not because they lacked talent, not because the universe conspired against them, but because the gravitational pull of the ordinary is enormous, and most people simply never find a reason strong enough to escape it. If this is resonating somewhere in your body right now, not just in your mind, but somewhere deeper, somewhere that aches a little, then you are already further along this path than you realize. If this idea has already touched something in you, imagine what comes next. Subscribe so you do not miss the rest of this journey. So what do we do? Not as a society. Societies move slowly, bureaucratically, with the grace of a glacier, but as individuals, as conscious beings who have woken up in the middle of this strange and precious life and realized that something is not right. What do we do when we recognize the psychology of mediocrity operating inside us? The first and most radical step is the one that sounds the simplest and is in fact the most difficult. You must stop confusing comfort with safety. These are not the same thing. Comfort is the absence of immediate tension. Safety is the presence of genuine flourishing. For most of the mediocre life, these two concepts have been fused together so completely that separating them feels like surgery without anesthesia. Your nervous system has been wired to interpret discomfort as danger. This is not a moral failing, it is a survival adaptation. But survival is not the same as living, and once you understand that, once you feel the difference in your bones, everything begins to shift. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. Think about that. The very feeling that has been pushing you toward the safe, the known, the average, that dizziness, that vertigo, it is not a warning to stop. It is the sensation of standing at the edge of your own expansion. The greatest artists, scientists, mystics, and builders in human history did not feel no fear. They felt enormous fear, and they moved anyway because they understood that the fear was not about danger. The fear was about significance. It was the feeling of something mattering. This is where psychology and spirituality converge on the same truth from different directions. Modern psychology tells us about neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire itself based on new experiences. Ancient wisdom traditions tell us that the self is not fixed, that you are not the story you have been told about yourself, that transformation is not an exception to the human condition, but its most essential feature. Both are pointing at the same door. The only question is whether you are willing to walk through it. And here is a practical truth that is easy to miss inside all this philosophy. Mediocrity does not collapse all at once. It was built in layers, and it dissolves in layers. You do not need to reinvent your entire life by tomorrow morning. What you need to do, and this is something you can do today, tonight, in the next hour, is find one place where you have been lying to yourself about what you really want. One relationship, one habit, one dream you buried under pragmatism, and instead of solving it, instead of fixing it, simply look at it honestly, see it clearly, name it without judgment. That act of honest seeing, repeated consistently, is how the psychology of mediocrity begins to lose its grip. But there is a secret still deeper than this, one that most conversations about potential and purpose never quite reach. The deepest truth about the psychology of mediocrity is not that it is imposed from outside. The deepest truth is that we maintain it from inside. And we maintain it not out of weakness, but out of a hidden loyalty. A loyalty to the people who raised us, the culture that shaped us, the community that accepted us in exchange for our conformity. To rise above mediocrity feels, at an unconscious level, like a betrayal, like leaving people behind, like saying that the life your parents lived, the choices your friends made, the values your community holds are somehow not enough. And that guilt, that silent, unspoken loyalty to the ordinary, is the real chain. The ancient Stoics had a concept they called amor fati, love of fate, the embrace of everything that has happened to you as the raw material of who you are becoming. Not resentment of the conditioning, not rage at the system, but a fierce and clear-eyed recognition. Yes, this is what shaped me, and now I am the one doing the shaping. The moment you stop blaming the environment for your smallness and start owning your expansion as a personal responsibility, not a burden, but a privilege, that is the moment everything changes. That is the moment you cross a line inside yourself that no external circumstance can ever fully uncross. The psychologist Viktor Frankl survived the Nazi concentration camps and emerged with a truth so simple and so radical, it still shakes the foundations of comfortable thinking. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our power to choose. In that choice lies our growth and our freedom. Mediocrity lives in the collapse of that space, in the moment when reaction becomes automatic, when life becomes a series of conditioned responses with no gap for consciousness in between. Greatness, not fame, not wealth, not power, but genuine human greatness, lives in the expansion of that space, in the choice made again and again to respond rather than react, to grow rather than repeat, to live rather than merely continue. You did not stumble upon this video by accident. Something in you, something that has been waiting, possibly for a very long time, led you here, and that something is not mediocre, it is not ordinary, it is not average. It is the most alive and essential part of you, the part that remembers, even dimly, even through years of conditioning and compromise, that you came here to be more than a well-adjusted machine moving efficiently toward an ordinary grave. The psychology of mediocrity dominates society because society is built in many ways to perpetuate itself. But you are not society. You are a singular, unrepeatable convergence of biology and experience and consciousness that has never existed before and will never exist again. The fire is still there. It did not go out. It only went underground, waiting for someone, waiting for you, to dig deep enough and brave enough to bring it back to the surface where it belongs. Do not let this moment pass like every other moment. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me, what is the one thing you have been keeping buried? Subscribe, because this is only the beginning. The most important conversations are the ones we keep coming back to, and I will be here every week, waiting to go deeper with you.